The World War I era was a very dreadful period for anyone who remembers or have heard about it. But it was even more dreadful for the 65 million soldiers who were forced to leave their homes and sent into battle. Imagine having to wake up to the sound of gunfire and fighting enemy troops every day for 4 years straight. Not only that, but still having to settle for very unconventional foods just for the slimmest chance of survival. Now that's something you wouldn't wish for even the meanest person you know. But however, that was the harsh reality of World War I soldiers. This is the story of one of the most deadliest times in history, and I bet you this one will send shivers to your bones. It's bad enough that this is first on our list. Now, you can only imagine how bleak the rest on the list will be. But not to scare you. I mean, this is what they mostly survived on. Rats were not exactly the most delectable options, but it only shows the fascinating yet extreme measures American soldiers took to ward off hunger. Like the saying goes, desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah, desperate times call for desperate measures.
Even more so, the trenches provided the perfect breeding ground for these creatures. Rats in particular thrived in the unsanitary and cramped conditions, feeding off of discarded food scraps and dead soldiers. So while their presence was a constant nuisance, they became an unexpected source of survival during the darkest days of the war. The soldiers then seized the opportunity to set traps, lay out bait, or even resort to good old-fashioned brute force to catch these sneaky rodents. Once captured, they'd prepare them as best they could, roasting or frying them over makeshift fires to kill any potential diseases and make them somewhat palatable. Surprisingly, some soldiers claimed that rat meat tasted similar to rabbit or squirrel. Hunger was always a constant companion for these soldiers in the trenches, so anything and everything was seen as food, including insects. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Eating bugs? Yuck! But before you squirm at the thought, consider this. Insects have been consumed by various cultures for thousands of years. They're packed with protein, vitamins, and minerals, which makes them an ideal source of sustenance, especially in times of scarcity. So grasshoppers, crickets, and mealworms were among the most common insects that soldiers would catch and consume. These critters were easily found in and around the trenches, making them an accessible and reliable food source. Plus, they required minimal preparation. A quick fry or roast over an open flame, and voila! A crunchy, protein-packed snack was ready to keep the soldiers going. Some reports even say that grasshoppers, when cooked just right, had a nutty flavor, while crickets offered a subtle taste that was oddly satisfying. Moreover, the protein content of insects was a godsend for the soldiers, who needed to keep up their strength for the grueling tasks they faced daily. Horses in World War I were like a soldier's greatest companion because they played very crucial roles in the war effort, from moving heavy artillery to transporting troops across treacherous terrain. Hence, the bond between soldiers and their steeds was profound, which made it even unimaginable to think of them as food sources. But when these horses became casualties to the war, there was only one way to utilize the situation: eat them. However, it was still hard enough for the soldiers to eat what was once considered a companion. But to minimize the emotional impact, military cooks devised various ways to prepare horse meat. They experimented with different recipes and incorporated various herbs and spices to mask the distinct flavor. It's even believed that some soldiers reported that when properly cooked, the meat tasted similar to beef or venison, which provided a much-needed semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos.
It's very, very like beef. It's quite sweet. It's quite sweet. It's quite sweet. The flesh is quite tight.
But of course, this did not go down without criticism. Animal rights advocates decried the practice, arguing that it was inhumane and disrespectful to the noble creatures that had served soldiers so faithfully. However, the prevailing sentiment was that the sacrifice of horses for the survival of human soldiers was a necessary evil in times of war. Okay, this doesn't sound so appetizing, but again, satisfying your taste buds wasn't an option during those times. As long as it was cooked or roasted over a fire, it was considered as food. Now, trench stew was simply a concoction born out of necessity and resourcefulness. It was a mishmash of whatever they could scrounge up. We're talking leftover meats, veggies that were past their prime, hardtacks, and sometimes even tobacco or alcohol for more flavor. Of course, it wasn't gourmet cuisine. But hey, these soldiers weren't exactly dining at a fancy restaurant. Now, the process of making trench stew was about as simple as it gets. Just chop up those odds and ends, toss them into a pot, and let it simmer away over the open flames. And I bet the stories that were shared over trench stew were inspiring.
Pour la France! En avant!
Imagine a group of soldiers gathered around a small fire and sharing tales of bravery, longing for home, or even the occasional jokes just to lift their spirits. These biscuits were famously so hard and almost impossible to crack with the teeth, so soldiers would have to soak them in water or tea before they were even manageable to bite and chew. It was even rumored that if you put a piece of hardtack in front of your pocket, it could potentially stop a bullet. Well, not like anyone has confirmed that theory yet. The production of hardtack was a well-orchestrated process. They were also known as army bread or sea biscuit, made from just 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. Now, it was a well-thought-out design because it was meant to be long-lasting and able to withstand the rigors of long journeys and harsh environments. Its hard texture made it practically indestructible, allowing it to be stacked and stored with ease. In fact, some soldiers humorously refer to it as iron rations due to its rock-hard consistency. And because the biscuits were so dense and solid, they were a practical choice for the military and could be transported in bulk without the fear of crumbling or spoiling. However, while hardtack was a reliable source of sustenance, it was hardly a delight. Soldiers often joked that the only way to eat it was to boil it until soft, fry it until hard, and then throw it away. Its taste was bland, lacking any form of sweetness or flavor, more like eating stale cardboard. And this often left the soldiers longing for a taste of home or anything more appetizing. Bully beef was also known as corned beef, and this meal was a true lifesaver for the troops. In the unforgiving conditions of the trenches, where fresh food was often a distant memory, this canned meat became a staple of their daily sustenance. The nickname bully might sound a bit odd, but it actually comes from the French word bouilli, which means boiled meat. It was a very fitting name because the beef was slow-cooked and preserved in its own juices, which made it a practical choice for long-term storage and transportation. Now, you might be wondering how this canned food found its way into the soldiers' ration packs. Well, bully beef was the product of early 20th century food preservation techniques. The meat was salted and cooked at high temperatures, creating an airtight seal that prevented bacterial growth and spoilage. As a result, it had a long shelf life, making it ideal for feeding troops on the front lines, where fresh supplies were a luxury. But truth be told, bully beef wasn't exactly a treat. Soldiers often described it as dense, chewy, and quite salty. It was even more challenging to chew, especially when they were already dealing with the toughness of hardtack biscuits. Think of it like a workout for your jaw. You know, the exercise you never asked for. However, it wasn't about the taste. It was about survival. This stew was simply made with turnips, carrots, potatoes, and large chunks of pork or beef. But why the name Maconochie? It was named after its inventor, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Maconochie. Interesting, right? Well, it gets even better from here. The stew usually came in a can, which makes it easy to store, transport, and distribute to troops on the front line. Although Maconochie stew provided much-needed sustenance, soldiers often found its taste and texture unappetizing. The long cooking and preservation process also caused it to have a bland consistency. Because of this, the soldiers despised this soup, and in the popular quote by an unknown soldier, the stew was summed up perfectly. Warm in the tin, Maconochie was edible. Cold, it was a man-killer. But despite its less than stellar reputation, Maconochie stew played a crucial role in maintaining the physical well-being of soldiers during World War I. This has to be the best one on this list, and one of the closest foods to home. I'm sure you agree with me. These were dried fruits like raisins, apricots, and prunes, as well as dried vegetables like peas and carrots. And while it may not sound like much, these simple dried wonders packed a punch when it came to nutrition. They were also lightweight, compact, and easy to carry, which made them a perfect choice for soldiers on the move. One of the most significant advantages of dried fruits and vegetables was their extended shelf life. Unlike their fresh counterparts that would spoil within days, these dried beauties could last for months, making them a reliable and consistent source of essential vitamins and minerals for the troops. Moreover, dried fruits offered a more natural sweetness, unlike the rest of the food options that soldiers were used to. See why I said it's probably the best on the list. So there you have it, folks. Can you imagine the bravery it took for American World War I soldiers to not only face the horrors of war, but also battle their hunger with such unconventional foods? From munching on rats and insects to chowing down on horse meat and enduring the tasteless Mackinochi stew, these soldiers truly exemplified the saying, "Necessity is the mother of invention."